Welcome to episode 97. White people prefer for black people to code switch at work. From the title, it's clear what the episode is about, but this episode's conversation was sparked by a recent article in Forbes, exploring this in a professional working environment. We take a closer look into this and also reflect on our own personal experiences, both in the workplace and outside, and how we consciously act due to the color of our skin. This is going to be an insightful, meaningful conversation. You certainly don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
Take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Well, happy Monday! Oh, how's everyone doing?
Splendid.
Good.
Okay, let me go. Let me do it properly. Olu, how are you?
I am well. It's been a tough week, work-wise, but rewarding.
Tough week. We're at Monday.
It's getting hard now.
Yeah, the week's just started. The week's just started. In case
but the previous week was was a tough week, but it was rewarding. Got a lot of face time with the CFO. Got a lot of time presenting sort of the strategy of the company.
The way
allow it. Just keep
because P was like, "Oh, the role's getting stressful." He goes, "Yeah, had a lot of exposure with the CFO." That's trying to shut you down, P.
It's been a tough week.
I only work with CEOs these days, so it's cool.
You only work with CEOs. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, but no, it's been a tough week, but I'm happy it's over. And looking forward to sort of end of September. We're probably going to try and travel somewhere, a short trip, a short getaway.
Oh, you're not with work. You mean personal?
Personal, yeah, some time off.
Is that Olu? Is this time for the infamous Bali trip or too soon?
Bali can't be short. Bali needs to be a long trip. It can't be a short trip.
Bali's a one-way
ticket. One-way ticket.
Yeah,
Bali's not a trip.
Bali's not a trip. Bali is you've got enough properties to not come back.
I don't know.
Enough stocks to not come back.
I rate you for holding on to this Bali dream, man. You're serious about it.
No, I'm serious about it. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Daniel, how are you?
You don't need as much as you think. Sorry.
Yeah, Daniel, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm alright. I'm just plodding along. You know, just a new week, new day. Just yeah. Yeah. How are you, sure?
I'm good. I'm back in the UK at the moment. Just started a new role as well, which is getting a bit intense. So lots of things to learn, lots of new people to meet. But really enjoying it. I think also when this episode comes out, I would have officially become a student again because I'm studying now part-time. And I start that actually when this episode comes out. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, lots of exciting things, but all good.
Nice.
Maybe share more a little bit as to what kind of student you're going to be.
So
is it GCSEs?
Yeah,
exactly.
You're not
A-level.
No, so I think so I've been thinking the last couple of years about doing an MBA program, and I was a bit back and forth about it. I was also in two minds about whether to do it full-time or part-time. Earlier this year, I decided that I wanted to do a part-time program because I wanted to learn and then also apply real life in a role in my business outside of work at the same time. So I applied for different courses that basically catered for that. And there was a course at Cambridge Uni that basically ticked all the boxes. I applied. I have to give a shout out to Pabilo, Olu, and Nathan for holding me accountable in my other mastermind groups as well, to make sure I pulled through with the application. I got offered the place, and I officially start in September, which is in a few days, and I would have already started once this episode comes out. So exciting times. 2-year course is a big commitment, but it should be good. Good networking and good things to learn.
Nice, congratulations.
Yeah. I'll share like some cliff notes in our weekly takeaway episodes maybe. But let's see. P, wrap us up.
I'm great, honestly. The last 3 weeks were tough. As expected, I knew it would be. It was just the time of the year and what we're trying to get done work-wise, also on the property side of things. And then we had 3 days with the family out in the mountains. Just a game changer. So it was just a reminder of taking physical and mental breaks away from where you live and where you work. And sometimes as high performers, we tend to sort of just keep going and we're getting stuff done. And it will come to a point where it will break you. And so I was definitely getting to a point where I was like, no, I need something. So I'm not Batman, not all the time. So but yeah, no, it's good. So I'm back, recharged and ready to go again. And I'm looking forward to this discussion for sure.
And by the way, Pete, a special shout out to the young king, Karim. Happy birthday. Big round of applause for the young prince. Future trust fund baby. He looked like he was waxing back the protein shakes on his birthday.
Mate, the greatest of all time, man. I'm telling you, the guy is he's just incredible, man. Honestly. Time flies. But now he's actually gone from like the baby days are truly over. Like his face, he's lost the baby fat, he's slim. It's getting to a point where I think 2 to 5 is
he looks like he's got enough power to take your knees for sure.
He still squats for like 10 hours a day in the same position, just holds it. So all good.
But actually, it's a decent segue for us actually about like the future adapting, whether you need to adapt or not, how the future looks like. Probably that's a window, Daniel.
Precisely. So the title of this episode 97, is White People Prefer Black People to Code Switch at Work. White people prefer for Black people to code switch at work.
Was that the title?
Okay.
That's the title.
Yeah, that's the title.
Startling title. Startling.
That's the title.
I'm code switching. I'm code switching already.
So, around this episode, this title is also the title of a recent Forbes article, and that's going to form the basis of this discussion. So stay tuned. We're going to get locked and loaded. So, guys, we're going to talk about code switching at work. But before we do so, we're going to define what code switching is, just for the listeners and also for the context of this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to define code switching as the adjustment of one's style of speech, appearance, behavior, and cultural expression in ways that optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality service, and employment opportunities. Some of these adjustments include attempting to sound white or from wealthy English-speaking backgrounds for those with accented speech, to increase perceptions of competence, and straightening your hair to appear more professional. These can seem like minor temporary inconveniences, but the cost of not doing so could and may contribute to inequality in housing, arrests, and hiring. So that's what we're defining as code switching for this conversation. We're going to get straight into it in terms of, do we think there are benefits, disadvantages of code switching? We're going to share some personal stories, but who wants to kick off? Pete, you got a lot to say. You start. I'm throwing it out there for how you want to start the conversation.
Can I just add, just with one very quick remark, what we were talking about before we pressed recording, just the fact that, Daniel, you shared this article a few weeks ago, and we thought it would be a great discussion to have. For me, I had never been even made aware of that terminology before, code switching. I knew what the behaviors were, but I wasn't aware of it. But then in the conversation that we had pre-recording the episode, you said that you're familiar with that term, right? And it's something that you've heard of for years. Because I think that's also an interesting context to give, where maybe behaviorally we've been doing it, but the terminology might actually be different, or it's not as widely known.
Yeah, the term can be used for people that are multilingual, bilingual, and would switch from one language to another depending on their environment. But in this context, we're talking about the way we speak, our behaviors, how we might dress, our appearance, etc. So the code switching can sometimes is used interchangeably for one's speech or bilingual ability. But actually, before we kind of double click into this conversation, I would like to just share a bit around the article and what the studies suggest and what the article evokes. So it talks about how Black people may change their appearance and how they may speak in a professional environment at work. There are also some examples of, in the media, how it's exploded. We've all probably seen memes and GIFs of when Barack Obama, I think, was saying hello to a number of different people. He got towards Black people, the handshake was somewhat different, and everyone was like, yeah, that's my G. We've seen others, in football lockers or in American football, where they see someone of the like that looks like them, they act differently. So in the study, in the article, it suggests that white people prefer their black colleagues to code switch and deem code switching as professional workplace behavior. So what they did, they asked a black and a white woman. Well, they asked a black, white women and men to evaluate a fictional black co-worker in a law firm who shares that they either code switch or do not code switch at work. In the code switching example, the black co-worker shares that they use a white sounding name, strive to speak standard English, and straighten their hair. In contrast, the non-code switching black co-worker goes by their given black sounding name, uses their normal African American vernacular English, and wears their hair in a natural state, which is textured. And in this comparison, they compare the reactions of these characters to different racial groups and gender groups. Overall, the participants perceived that the code switching black co-worker was more professional than the code switching black co-worker, indicating that white people's norms and values may define professionalism in workplaces. Black participants also perceived that the non-code switching black co-worker was more professional than white participants, suggesting that marginalized groups also value and recognize black cultural norms as professional work. Essentially meaning the black people didn't see a problem with their black co-worker in the natural hair state with a black sounding name and using African American vernacular English. So that's just to kind of paint the picture of this conversation and the discussion, which I think is quite eye-opening, especially when we work maybe in predominantly white areas and may not even notice these things or even look in the mirror ourselves and realize that we may change slightly or subtly just to fit in to the crowd. So is everyone clear on that?
Yeah.
Crystal.
Okay, Pete.
Yeah.
Pete, what are your thoughts on maybe the article or maybe some personal experiences?
Just I'll get my initial reaction, and I guess we'll get into the conversation. I think first we have to understand that if I speak from the lens of a black person, of course, we are growing up in a Western society and we're trying to, make something of ourselves. And on the path of doing that, we're stepping into white dominated global companies, right? So I'm not surprised that code switching is a thing, because ultimately what we are doing is we're stepping into a territory which is not owned by us, right? Historically, and code switching is almost a survival tactic to get us in a position where we believe we can start to thrive, right? And so you're trying to figure out a way or navigate through a territory that's new to you in order to make sure you stay there and you continue developing yourself. Now, I think there's levels to code switching. I think that what you've been talking about, Daniel, I think is there's some extremes there. But for me, what comes to my initial reaction is just survival tactic. It's not our territory, and we're trying to figure out a way on how we can adapt to stay there. So that's what I'll say. Let's go around and then we can share some more thoughts.
Yeah,
Sure.
I can go. I could go. Yeah, so I agree with Pete. Like, code switching is typically done as a survival method, right? And I think in this discussion we're talking about workplace and around white colleagues. But when I think about code switching, right, I think it's something that you do to make other people comfortable or to protect yourself. So code switching could be, hey, I'm going to a rough neighborhood and I need to act a certain way, put a shout on so that I'm not seen as a victim. So I don't think there's anything I don't think code switching is a surprise, like P said. I think the difficulty is that we spend so much time in work and working, right? So the problem with code switching in your work environment is you spend, let's say, for example, 8 hours a day, right? So sort of 1/3 of your life working per se. So typically you're spending 1/3 of your day, your life having to make other people feel comfortable, and that can be mentally straining, right? And I think we're going to go into some details and some experience, right? But code switching is critical to surviving in the corporate world, personally, I think, right? And I'm not talking about code switching as, oh, the person sounds white or they sound posh. For me, that's not really even like, I think you can, for the listeners, you
I
can
think that's
hear.
taking it too far, but we can
Yeah,
get
I
into
think
that.
that's taking it. But I think on the core and the listeners can hear the way each and every one of us sound differently. Daniel is very articulate, right? But I would never turn around and say Daniel sounds always trying to sound white. No, I'll say Daniel is very articulate with the way. So I think that's taking it too far. But there's certain areas and experiences which I faced in the corporate world, and we'll go into it later, where it gets straining. Like it's very straining to just continuously feel like you have to make other people feel comfortable so that you can potentially accelerate or advance in your career.
Interesting. Sure.
I mean, not to repeat anything that we've already discussed with Pabilo and Olu's thoughts. I think the only thing that I would say is this. Again, the terminology I wasn't aware of, but the behavior is something that I'm definitely aware of. I think for me in school, it all started back then because I grew up in a predominantly white British area. There weren't many non-white kids in school, so right from the jump, you're already sticking out, and it's very easy for people to point you out and say that you're different. So I think there's that element where already right from a young age, you're trying to fit in. I probably would love to see if people who grew up in more diverse communities, if they feel like they needed to do this more or less. But I definitely think, at least from my perspective of where I grew up, it's something that was kind of ingrained from a younger age, to the point where definitely when I was younger, I would say that I would try to shy away from my cultural way of doing things, or like the food we eat, or the things that my mum and dad would watch. But then the older that I get, I think the more comfortable you get and embrace this culture a bit more. And actually, you want to embrace the diversity as a strength rather than something you want to hide from. But we can talk about that in more detail afterwards. But that's been my general experience of it from a young age.
Okay.
How about yours, Daniel? What's your take?
P.
Sorry. Yeah, no, sorry. One thing that I think is common, because I think there's you can get on either end of the spectrum extreme levels of code switching, but I think one space that is probably quite common is if I start switch, like for example, a common thing is I talk slang when I'm with my circle of friends, and when I'm in the workspace, I don't use any slang. So you're not gonna hear me say, "Well, go on, what's going on? What you man saying? What's the next?" You're not gonna hear me talk that way, and I think that in itself is perceived as code switching. But actually, what you're doing is you're speaking the language of the environment that you're in, right? So I think sometimes people have a people like I know there are some people in my circle that say, "Be yourself. How you talk to the man them is how you should be talking." But I feel like you're missing the picture of that's not going to work. Like you wouldn't, if you did that. I feel like you're not trying to be there for very long. So it's for me. I think the common one is around that slang, right? And yeah, it's.
And P, I think you explained that quite well, because the point of language is about clearly communicating yourself, right? So if I go to the office and start speaking slang, right, I'm gonna waste most of my time trying to translate, or speaking too fast, trying to translate what I'm saying. Like, what does that mean? The person would be clueless, right? And that's so it's, I don't call that code switching. I think is using language as a best form of communication, right? I remember when I first started as an intern, I had a few calls with the team in Asia, right? And I learned that the best way to communicate was by slowing down in terms of the way I was speaking. So it's had nothing to do with quote unquote code switching in that scenario. I just see it as trying to clearly communicate and making that other person be able to digest it, versus if we both just start speaking two different languages, right? It's just gonna completely, you're not gonna be able to get the message across. But Daniel, what about you? Yeah.
No, I would be echoing a lot of what's been said, and I think there are different extremes in ways that you can code switch. There's code switching in the sense of, I wouldn't necessarily term it code switching, but adapting to the environment you're in, and that leads on from what people are saying about surviving. There are certain parts of the world that you wouldn't be speaking like this in order to survive. You would appear a certain way if you're walking through a certain neighborhood or a certain area in different parts of the world. You know, when Ollie and I went to Johannesburg and we're going to see my auntie, I asked her, is it safe to kind of walk? It wasn't too far, or get a taxi. She said, no, is it safe to walk to a supermarket? She said, it's okay, but walk around like you own the place. Don't become an easy target or a victim. And that's just not really changing your appearance, but walking in confidence and making sure you don't look like you're a tourist or you're not from this area. Where I feel as though, and what this article really highlights to me that was very different, is the appearance. In the last year and a half, with Black Lives Matter protests, with many people and organizations wanting to change their DEI sort of narrative and what they stand for as a company, ladies' hair has become a hot topic about how people's hair should be what people's hair should look like in a workplace and what it shouldn't, even for men. And there was a time when there was some images going around on social media of Black professional hairstyles and unprofessional hairstyles. And, you know, it gives some stark results that you'll be shocked as to why they would deem and term that as unprofessional and what is termed as professional. Just to give you a bit of color, every professional hairstyle that was as a result from that Google search was a white male. And that's something that even coincidentally, someone who was an intern, someone who did a placement, went to university and came back to my company full time, he messaged me a few months ago and said, Daniel, I'm thinking of changing my hairstyle to this. Do you think this is going to be allowed? Because he said, I haven't really seen anyone in the office like this, and he's not sure. So we had we had a conversation.
What hairstyle?
Yeah, which hairstyle was it?
He wanted to put cornrows in his hair.
Okay.
Because his hair had grown during lockdown, and he wanted to change the hairstyle, and that's something he wanted to do.
Trying to be a breakdancer, but I'm on Venice Beach.
But I say that to say, I say.
Oh my God.
I say that to say, even with these examples.
Oh my God. And that's funny. You know what's funny? Is because I've seen Karim with cornrows.
He got me.
And the way that Karim's rocking it, now in my head, I'm thinking, I can imagine Karim with the cornrows, and people are looking at him being like, "You're a breakdancer, bro." Oh my God.
No, keep it. Go ahead.
I say that to say, it's quite interesting that this is the perception, even from this study, these two fictional characters, that white people see their straightened, the smooth textured European style hair as more professional than someone's natural hair. And that's quite, when you think about it, that's quite alarming. And the fact that if someone felt they needed to code switch and change to fit that narrative, that's very different to how you speak in the workplace. You're changing your appearance, to changing who you are, just so that you can be taken more seriously, taken more professionally. So that would be, my initial thoughts on that. But
yeah,
flipping this on its head, do you think there are benefits of code switching in, let's say, the extremes in the workplace?
Think so. Look, I think there are, because and I know I got some boys that are going to listen to this and hit me up after and say, P, nah, getting it wrong.
You're sellout.
Selling out. You should be code switching. And I think it depends on how you're doing it. But this is the reality. The reality is that, I speak for myself, predominantly you're coming from a low income background, right? And you're stepping into a space where you're ultimately there to develop. You don't have the ingredients. You don't know left from right when you're starting up. And so you're doing what you think is necessary to, like I said, stay, adapt, survive, and then ultimately thrive. So code switching helps you on that path in terms of developing. I think the biggest benefit is it helps to groom, right? It helps a certain level of grooming, certain level of professionalism that can get you to a point. It helps your branding. You can actually then, look back and help others that are in similar positions. The alternative, because I'm thinking about alternatives, is you create your own from an early age. You don't ever walk into a global company that's predominantly owned by white males and try and work or succeed in that space. You create your own, and by creating your own, you can create your own rules, your own culture, and how you go from there. So and unless you do that, there's going to be an element of having to mold, adapt, and that's what it is. But I just think let's not forget where we're coming from when we talk about this. And code switching is an element is a tactical and approach to get to where I think some of us are today. Right. The question is.
But yeah, I think I think Daniel mentioned the extreme, because and I think I want to understand when you say some of it is beneficial or that is grooming you, what you mean about, because code switching could be, I think there's extreme versions of it, and I think Daniel mentioned one in terms of, let's say for example your appearance, right? And if you think about it from I think we're talking from black men point of view, but imagine it as a black woman that goes to the office in natural hair, and natural hair is out, right? Now, are you saying for her to progress in a workplace, now she has to straighten her hair? So I think you need to specify what you mean about that.
I think I'm more speaking from, and I need to probably widen it from a black male standpoint, but there's an element of that process of code switching is almost like a bit of a corporate training, because it's from everything. It's perhaps the way in which you sit up on a meeting table. You actually try to articulate what you're saying. You actually groom yourself, right? You shave, keep yourself well shaven. You keep your hair cut relatively low. This is stuff that we didn't learn well enough, I think, on how to do, right?
Who said
I don't class that as.
But who said we had to do this? That's the thing. We're now assuming that we have to change the way we look because we have to fit a certain narrative. Who said that we had to be clean shaven? Of course, it depends on your industry and what industry you work in. But who said that you had to keep your hair relatively low? Because I'll tell you what, when I was in secondary school, we had a school handbook. On the first page, it had some rules that we had to adhere to. On that first page, it said that your haircut could not be lower than a grade 5. I said, this is rubbish. I am black. Grade 5 is more than what I've got now in my head. And we had a teacher. If you had your hair too low and you could see your scalp, you get sent home or get put in isolation. My guy, my friend, Anton,
Big up, Anton.
Come with shoe polish. So that when he got to school, polish all over the head. So it looked like he had a full head. That's how deep it was.
But maybe we should also talk about the point in time. I'm actually referencing when you're starting in your career, right? Because one of the questions, Daniel, I know is that long term. We can talk about what it looks like today, right? But I think when you're starting up, there are benefits in going through a process where you're code switching, because I feel like it's a part of cleaning up, branding. You can't come in with that hood. If I came in,
it depends where you've come from and how you've been brought up, because there is some sort of professionalism you have to deploy in the workplace.
For most of us, big cleanup.
Yeah, I think where I'm struggling is I'm hearing P and I'm hearing professionalism, but I don't take that into code switching, and I think that's where and that's where I'm struggling, because I think professionalism is not a code switching element. Is you're developing those skills, how to hold yourself in a room. It's got nothing to do with, even if you were in a room full of black people, right, and your parents or whatever, they'll teach you how to be professional and talk a certain way. When I think about code switching, I'm more thinking about the toxic element of code switching, in terms of how, where you don't feel comfortable to truly be yourself. So let me give you a perfect example for me personally, right? I'm a dark-skinned, quite physical appearance sort of looking guy, right?
Big chest.
Big chest.
Intimidating.
Physical can be perceived as intimidating, right? And during my whole sort of work experience, right, I've always having to sort of second guess and think about, how do I make other people feel less intimidated just by my presence? So perfect example. First year of uni or whatever, I didn't really wear glasses. I used to always have contact lenses. I felt comfortable in my contact lenses, right? But I realized, you know what? Some people start to feel more comfortable with me being in glasses versus being in contact lenses, and that was a conscious decision that I had to do when I first started my role. Now, is it less professional if I got contact lenses versus glasses, right? It's similar as in, will I, even if it's a casual Friday, right? When I first started my career, would I be comfortable enough to have a cap like this on, right? When I first started, or will someone be intimidated by me being in a cap in the office? And I think that's the element that is draining, right? And it's, and I'm thinking it from even a male point of view, right? If I think about it, I've had some conversations, some female black girls I know who have got natural hair, right? And having to feel like they can't just be themselves in that sense. Now, I feel like that's something where we need to hold the organizations more accountable. And the only way you can hold the organizations more accountable is by their exposure to different cultures and understanding that different cultures is got nothing to do with professionalism, right? And I had to do this growing up and working in different scenarios. Was like, slowly I would allow people to understand that, okay, you know what, Olu likes hip hop music, or Olu likes this sort of music, right? Just because I feel like I'm an example where that person can say, I work with Olu, right? Olu's a black person and he likes hip hop music, whatever, etc. In case they're outside of work and they interact with another person that likes hip hop music, automatically they want to equate that to, oh, this person's a hoodlum, right? And I remember another story we had was, I remember when P came to Paris. This is a funny one. P came to Paris. So P, I think Nathan, a few other friends of ours came to Paris to visit me whilst I was working there. And there was one night that we decided to go to a club. And if anyone's seen P in a club with music going on,
He is living his best.
Just to note, this was before any knee injury that Pabilo has sustained.
Before any knee injury.
What are you talking about?
P is living his best life on that dance floor, having a great time, right? And that night out, there was a few work colleagues that were with me. And I remember we were having a great time on the dance floor, running, just enjoying our life, right? One of my work colleagues, a white guy, came over to me at the end of the night and he was like, "Yo, Olu, like, you're black." And I was like, what does that mean?
Pause.
No, listen, what was his nationality or ethnicity?
It's French, isn't it?
German nationality, right? And I was like, I wanted to understand more what he meant about it. And he's like, you and your friends, you know, listen to hip hop music, like, you guys are so cool, like, you guys are really black. And I was like,
I don't remember you swinging for anyone that night, bro. So what's going on?
No, because again, I use this as an opportunity to educate people versus someone that's never interacted with a black person, and only black version that he's seen is someone in the workplace. I'm not gonna be, or in TV, and in the work office, I'm not gonna be living my best life listening to Jay-Z and Kanye West, and like, that's not professional, right? In that scenario. But I use that as an opportunity to show to him, no, don't get twisted. I'm black in every aspect, but there's different behaviors that are appropriate for different environments. So this is where I'm saying, like, we've got to be careful with saying switch coding is okay in the workplace, when I'm more referring to it as less around the professionalism and developing as a professional. And I'm talking more of the toxic elements, where it's like, no, change your appearance, change your hair, change the music that you truly like to, change the topics that you might want to talk about. Like, that is different, and that's not healthy. If one, like I mentioned, 8 hours you spend in the office, if 1/3 of your life, right, you spend having to be someone completely different, that's not healthy.
No, and you're right, and I think what you said, I think that's so important to clarify as well. I think there's an element of clarifying what it means to be professional, and then other part, which is not changing your code on who you are just to fit in, because that shouldn't happen anywhere. Like, you can still keep your DNA, right? But then it's perhaps cleaning up some of the pieces, like I mentioned, from based on where you grew up.
And you don't realize that how by you staying true to that element and other people seeing it, how important it is for other people. Because I remember I was an audit manager, and I was driving a few of the associates to the office. And whilst we were driving, I had Drake playing at the time. And
shout out Certified Lover Boy, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Drake playing. And my work colleague, like one of the associates who had just joined the team, like a month, 2 months went by, and she came over to me and she was like, "Look, am I frozen, guys?" Or
yeah, you're frozen.
Yeah.
With some really funny smile.
It's funny, really funny. Yeah.
I lost it.
Go ahead.
I didn't pin screen it.
Is it better now? Yeah. Okay, where was I? Okay,
was
yeah.
like
So, yeah. So I remember a work colleague of mine. She came over to me like I think 2 months afterwards, and she was like, "Thank you for being authentic." Like it made me feel comfortable to bring my true self into the office, and I didn't feel like I had to pretend like I liked classical music or I had to be a certain person just to fit in. I could truly be myself, and that's what I think is the importance of just understanding what is being professional and what is truly changing in a toxic way. And you got to be careful with that line.
It's funny you mentioned that about the music and not having to pretend you like classical. And it's no. Pete, what's funny?
What are you gonna say? What are you gonna say? Cool.
No, because I'm someone who actually likes classical music, and I go to classical concerts, and I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. And when sometimes I'm at work,
where you learn that from the corporate world?
No, I learned this from GCSEs. I like classical music from back in when I was studying. The reason I started listening to classical music was when I was revising for my GCSEs. It was one genre of music that I could listen to without being distracted, and I enjoyed the melodies and different types of music. And something at work we sometimes have like jukebox sessions, an hour, or we share a song on a Friday where we just have half an hour, and people might opt to share a song, why they like the song and what it means to them, and we go around. And I've done it a few times, and the music I've typically chosen is Ludovico Einaudi and Hans Zimmer. And I remember I was asked once, I said, "Hey, Daniel, do you like classical music?" I was like, yeah, I love it. But I felt like they were asking me in the sense of,
they were surprised.
Do you actually like it, or do you listen to other music as well?
They were like, "Yo, Daniel, are you supposed to be playing some Wizkid? Like, where's that African stuff? What is this?"
No, I think they were expecting more of hip hop or rap, and I said, "No, I really like this music." I said, "This is one sort of music that really evokes different emotions and different feelings. It gets me in a pensive state, and it's just something I really enjoy, and it takes me back to certain memories." And I said, every time Ludovico Einaudi's in London, I make sure I try and go and see him live. And that, I don't shy away from telling anyone that I like classical music or Ludovico Einaudi. In the fact that when people actually know who he is, and many people have heard his music but wouldn't necessarily know who it is, they're actually quite shocked. And for me, it's just like I would have a conversation with anyone who would talk about sort of classical music or want to go to a classical concert. BBC at the Proms at Royal Albert Hall. I'm there. I would take that over a Wizkid concert, over a Burna Boy, over any of those concerts. I don't even care for them, to be honest. I would rather spend my money on a classical concert where I can enjoy the music, the different instruments, and just be in awe. Damn, I just want to go to one concert now.
But why?
But that's you, Daniel, being your authentic self, right? And I think whether it's rap music or classical music or Hans Zimmer or Wizkid, I think the idea about code switching is where you're repressing your authentic self. But in this case, that is you, right? That's your passion.
No, that's me. But people would assume otherwise, that I'm actually changing what I like or the music I enjoy listening to because I'm trying to fit into a certain narrative.
And I think, Daniel, the key thing there is that there's no one version of black. And I think that's the key thing for a lot of our white listeners, right? In our workplace, we're doing this reverse mentoring where black employees and white employees are matched together, and you talk about sort of your experiences. And at the beginning of this conversation and call, I said, look, I am not going to be able to articulate every Black person's experience. I'm only going to be able to articulate my experience and what I've seen from friends and families, right? But one thing I want you to know from the get-go is that there's no one definition of Black. Just the same way I assume there's no one definition of white, right? It's more based on your environment and upbringing. Go on, Dan.
But like you said, there's no one version of Black. But the thing is, I think sometimes things are so simple, but others don't see it as so simple and straightforward. A recent example, Cabinet MP Gavin Williamson met with Maro Itoje, a Saracens rugby football player. He thought he met with Marcus Rashford. Like, I don't... those are things where it's incomprehensible. Like,
in his mind, all you Black people look alike, right?
Exactly.
This is slightly off topic.
Yeah, but why don't you two at the top? So why don't you, Shawal and P? Why don't you give us some experiences on the toxic? I'm thinking more toxic code switching that you've experienced. Some of it. Give us some experiences.
Okay, I'll have a question. In fact, for P. Let's rewind to May 2012. When you finished university, you've packed your bags, you're going to New York for your internship with Novartis. What Kabilo did you take when you landed and arrived?
The knees were definitely healthier back then.
No, what it is, yeah, I think for me, I'm probably struggling right now to define the difference between being professional and being code switching. But I took myself, I just was a professional Pabilo, maybe like to the fullest extent. So if I had, say, some of my peers watching me, they'd probably say, okay, he doesn't talk like that with us. That would be their response. Is that code switching? I'm not sure. I'm just trying to bring, I don't know if you could argue that's code switching, but I tried to bring the highest professional level that I knew at the time when we were in New York, because that was the environment, right? The other people that were there were also graduates. So for me, it's yeah. I'm actually because Ollie's making a clear point around code switching, and it's losing who you are to fit in. And I'm actually thinking about examples. Have there been times where I've actually not been myself in order to please this particular executive or to make this particular senior manager look at me a certain way? I think what I've done is I've not shown my full self as opposed to switching to something else. So for example, I wouldn't bring my full self to work. I'd bring a fraction just because I'm not quite sure. For example, I'll give you a classic example, the one that came to mind. Might not be a strong example, but it's one nevertheless. It's about music, working, playing Chipmunk, and the guy.
Wait, which song? Fire Alive?
I can't remember. No, I can't remember. Just bars, just crazy bars. 2013, and one of our favorite executives walked past, David Murray. He pulled out the earphones from my ear, and my heart was beating so fast because I felt, because he respected myself and Shuo of our profiles and liked everything about what we had brought to the table. We were pretty much ourselves with him, but what I didn't want him to see, I didn't want him to know. I didn't want him to think, "Raw, this one's from the hood, you know." Do you know what I mean? I didn't want him to get that impression. So when he took it out. I tried to pause it, and I think I scrambled, and I just said to him. He kind of said, "Oh, who's that?" I said, "Oh, yeah, just some guy, just some guy from London." I was scrambling. So what do you call that? I didn't code switch, but I don't want to give him my full self because I'm afraid that he would then perceive me a certain way moving forward and say, "Right, he's actually hood." But you know what I mean? So that's where, for me, my personal experience of more been around that. And I think what's happened is only when you've spent a number of years in a certain setting, then you can actually start to bring your full self to work, right? So maybe the last 4 or 5 years, it's been not an issue. Hasn't been an issue. And actually there's power in doing that because then people see, your authenticity. But in the early days, I didn't want, like, for example, I didn't want anyone to engage with me and get the sense, is this guy from Edmund Green?
Why not? Did you feel that would block opportunities internally, give a different perception of you? Why did you want people to know?
I felt like you're gonna just devalue me. You're gonna just look at me and say, "Oh, yeah, we're just we're just helping him out," or we're just, it was like you devalue me. You feel like you're helping me out. I don't belong here. All of those things were in my mind, right? So that's kind of maybe my personal experience.
And in the early stages, P, did you think you belonged there?
Yeah, no, I never ever thought I don't belong here, because I know the kind of work that I'm putting in. John Crank rooms. I know the work I've been putting in, but there's not enough of us in these environments. So you're thinking, I'm the only one they're gonna look to and think, yo, where's he really from? Do you get what I'm trying to say? So I don't think I doubted myself in being there. It was just more, okay, how do I survive to stay here? And one of the ways to survive is show them a fraction and be professional. Leave all that music behind. I'm not going to tell you what I really enjoy listening to. That's when I go home to my room. Do you know what I mean? I'm banging Meek. I'm not going to tell you, yo, Meek just dropped the album, Troy Ave and them, man. I can't tell you that. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
But then, quick question on that. Do you not then think that could be detrimental to someone else who comes into the organization that looks like you? For example, if you've now tuned yourself to be that also kind of model perfect black role model, or perfect black professional, someone who now comes from a similar background, similar upbringing to you, who now comes into the workplace, hasn't had the necessary information or kind of pep talk that you need to kind of tune yourself to mold it, to be molded, and then now start comparing the two of you, saying, oh, Pabilo, very professional, articulates, crosses his T's, dots his I's.
Never listen to hip hop music.
Never listen to hip hop music. Always, very sociable in work outings, meetings, always adding some valuable contributions and keeping his mouth shut when he needs to. And we've got Jamal, like, just comes in 5 minutes late every day.
Why'd you got to be called Jamal?
Because keeping a narrative in terms of the Forbes article, it's a black sounding name.
Tyrone.
Jamal now comes in, doesn't really care to interact with others, keeps his headphones in, music pumping, very different behaviors to you. And this is only highlighted and amplified because the two of you are black. If there were white individuals, there will never be a comparison. But the fact that you're black, there will be that comparison. So do you not think that may hamper someone else's experience?
So a couple of things. I think so. Today I'm 31, and I think I'm a great role model for someone coming in new to the organization. At the time, back in 2012, I was 22 years of age. All I know is I'm coming into this new environment, and I'm not trying to blow my opportunity because I like Meek Mill so much. I want to hold on to that identity, or I like saying Wagwan so much that I'm going to use it in this workplace. I'm saying, look, I got one shot at this. My mom's put in work. I'm going to do what it takes to adapt, survive, and thrive. Now, you're absolutely right, but this is where I think over time we start to improve the situation. You also have to understand most of my experience, I've been the only black person in these environments, the only black person on certain flights, the only black person in certain corporate rooms. So there haven't been enough of me for me to feel comfortable enough to be like, let me let my guard down. You get what I'm trying to say? So there is, but since I've been working over the years, we've had more and more of diverse backgrounds coming into the space, which makes us feel more comfortable, right? Myself and Shuel. But in the beginning, it's just me. So I'm not about to say, yo, Meek, what you man saying about that thing? Ain't about to happen.
You definitely said you spoke enough about Meek Mill on the weekends to make up for the weekdays anyway.
Sure, share your thoughts.
No, it's interesting because I think, especially, I think if I think about the early days when I first met Pabilo, especially in 2012, especially in that New York trip, I thought, wow, this guy is serious. Like, this guy never jokes. He never. And then
straight face.
always straight face. And it was only during the summer when we were actually in Switzerland that I really got to know him. And I thought, wow, this guy's got a great sense of humor. But in the office, if you're trying to get this guy to say a joke, mate, it is like squeezing blood out of a stone. And I remember,
I think that's another one. Sure, just on that one, another one about code switching. This is another one we haven't mentioned. Is the way you laugh. Oh my god, this is a big one. In the end, if I'm with Leslie, I'm screaming the house down. I'm running over cars. We're going crazy. In the work environment, yeah, if something is genuinely funny, the laugh is like, I can't even do the laugh right now, but it's like.
Is it like the honorary one?
No, that's it. It's very sort of, I don't know how you would call it.
Constricted.
Kept under wraps. So if I was to laugh the way I want to laugh in the work environment, I feel like they'll say to me, Pabilo, get up and leave. Do you know what I'm saying? That's just how I felt. So anyways, but I'm sure, sorry, continue.
But I think it does really, I think there's a couple of elements. I think there's an element where it's just self-development. I think all of us, when we get mature, feel a lot more comfortable in our skin, then probably the need for this code switching touchwood reduces. I was just thinking when Pabilo was talking about it, I think it all comes down to representation and how many people you have that look like you around you in particular environments. And I think whether you're black or brown or Muslim or whatever religion, a lot of these things or a lot of these cultures, people typically won't get exposed to it apart from what they see in the media or entertainment, etc. And all they'll have is basically their experience with you. And that comes with like a weight to it, where if I know that someone hasn't met someone from a Bangladeshi community before and I'm the first person, then probably the way I react and the way I behave will signal to them, whether it's intentional or unintentional, that actually, okay, this is how this community typically is. And I think a lot of people from diverse backgrounds who don't have as much representation think about this a lot more, and probably because of that, they feel like this need to adapt, but it reduces over time. In terms of these personal scenarios, it's difficult because apart from those times in school when I'd be very conscious about what food my mum gave me for lunch, or conscious of the fact that the previous night I had left my school clothes near the kitchen and my mum cooked a banging meal that I loved, but then it made my clothes smell. So when I'm walking to school the next day, I'm conscious that, oh, what if people say that my clothes smell a particular way? These are things as a kid that get quite ingrained, and you're probably conscious of this as you grow up. Now I think it's actually become
that's why you was banging the aftershave, innit?
But that's a habit. But then growing up, I've actually seen how that experience has somehow turned into a strength, where when I'm in an environment where I've just relocated to Tokyo, there's no other British people in the office, let alone British Asian people. I have to a certain extent, adapt, because now people don't shake hands, they bow. People greet the most senior person first rather than whichever age you are. So there's all these cultural adaptations that I think now I can adapt to in a better way, easier way, and connect with people quicker in different parts of the world because of actually that experience as a younger person. So now I think there's elements that can become a strength as long as you still don't hide the core identity of who you are. But again, that's, as Ollie said, we're all speaking from our own personal experiences. Not each experience can be the same or will be the same.
One thing I'll add, and I think we've all experienced this, is nowadays, and it takes years to get to this point. You're almost revered for who you are. They love you, right? Because you're bringing a different perspective. You get it. You're still yourself, and you're valued. And you almost look back and think, why would I have tried to be anything different in the beginning? But it takes a while to get there. But I think today, if you took us out of the organization, they would say, hey, where you guys going? We'll pay you more to stay. They really appreciate what we bring to the table, right? And ourselves.
No doubt. People don't want to hire, not that they don't, people don't hire black people because they want them to share the same thoughts and experiences as them. They share the same experiences as them. They have diversity of thought and opinion. Hence, they want to create a more diverse workforce, whether it's for tick boxing exercise or it's really for, well, whether it's formative or whether it's genuine. But the fact is, if you don't allow yourself to bring, I wouldn't say code switch, but if you don't bring yourself to work and share your experiences, your ideas, and your thoughts, you're actually not helping the organization, nor are you helping to bring other black or brown talent through the door. Because when they see your value, when you share those experiences, they think, wow, this is someone we can learn from. we need to get more people like this through the door.
Can I ask you guys? Sorry, Daniel. I wanted to ask you guys a question. Do you observe code switching or notice it more now than you did like 5 or 10 years ago in the different environments you've been in?
I experience it less, but I think the reason why I experience it less is just because you grow confidence in yourself. So I think as you start to progress in your career and accelerate in your company, you realize the power in your identity and your true self. So I think in the initial stage, and Daniel, I think, and P, I think you mentioned it a bit, but I saw so many benefits from my upbringings and a lot of stuff that I learned outside of work and learned in my neighborhood and where I grew up. Right. I feel like there's so many things it taught me in terms of work ethics, right? And not taking certain things for granted and being able to think a certain way outside of the box, right? And maybe not having all the information and all the resources, but being able to still get to some sort of solution, right? So I think when I first started, I think I mentioned it, right? There was an element to me where I was trying to hide because I didn't want to be seen as confrontational, loud, aggressive, right? I could be listening in a meeting, right? And you'd be like, wait, that doesn't make any logical sense. This is the right way to do it. But you just didn't feel comfortable enough to speak up because you're like, oh, I don't want to be that person that like, what do you know about it? Or like you're being aggressive, you're being confrontational, etc. Right? Now I've reached a point where I'm like, screw it. I know the quality of my work and I know what I bring to the table. So for a lot of the listeners, I really say, look, code switching is something you, and this is the difficulty, right? I try to switch it between code switching and being professional. And professional, there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't see that as code switching, right? Is even what Shuwal mentioned about going to Japan, different cultures. I spent most of my life traveling as a consultant. You learn different cultures. You learn the way to greet people. You adapt to those environments, the way they work. That is completely different, right? And I think as a young professional, you need to do that to develop, to grow, to be able to get into certain rooms. Take it outside of the corporate space, whatever business or endeavors you decide to take in life, you're going to need to know how to interact in those particular rooms. So that's one side of it. Now, in terms of the toxic element of code switching, in terms of your appearance, I say, look, it's all about bringing your best self forward. And at the end of the day, I've looked at it as, look, I've just got to work harder in that sense, right? I've got to work harder. And I think work harder when I get into those positions, like my name, right? My name on a CV, you can tell I'm black. There's no when you get to that interview room, you're gonna know who I am, right? So I try to make my experience and my qualities and my expertise do the talking. And then I also like to add the last point is as you get more senior and you get into your role, I do believe it's our responsibility as the representation to bring our true self to work and feel comfortable, because there's other people watching us and wanting to say, okay, you know what, I can be here, right? I cannot like go for whatever and only care really about football and still be comfortable and be able to accelerate in the company. I can come to office on a dress down Friday if there's no clients or whatever and have a cap on and still be able to get my work done.
Only if it's a take flight hat, Olu. Only if it's a take flight hat.
No, but I do feel like there's an importance of, because the only way this code switching in a toxic way is going to get resolved is representation, but not just representation in entry level, representation on all levels, right? The CEO needs to have another exec or VP on his board, which is black, which he interacts with, goes out, goes for dinner, gets to understand, so that way his biases, which we all have biases, will be challenged and tackled, right? And that's the only way it's going to happen. I feel like the people that are on my same level, you feel more comfortable to have certain conversations with people on your own level, like listen to certain music with people on your own level, and it's not looking like a promotion, right? So I remember my CFO, we used to go to the gym together. He would be like, yo, I can't get that Nigeria jersey. Like we would have conversations in the gym, like proper. And it was all because of his diversity and interaction with other people. And I think that's the only way you're going to solve the code switching element. But yeah, sorry, the other guys. P, you said you had something to say.
No, I'm reflecting as we're all talking. I think also code switching. I think it's very important to speak to people that are starting in their corporate careers, because they could set the tone with themselves on switching to a point where they've created this identity that they have to live up to, and that is where there's a big risk, because then at what point do you then switch back to who you are? You don't want to look at yourself in the mirror and not be happy with what you're bringing to who you're presenting yourself in corporate. So I think it's particularly important for those who are starting, because you don't know, you're looking for a reference point. And if there's not enough of you out there, it's like, well, who do I be? Well, okay, let me be. So, but then I think sorry, that's what point I wanted to make. Based on what we have experienced at this stage, the advice would be to those starting is be yourself. Because if you can, and this is why I think I said, that's my point I wanted to bring. If it's taking me this amount of years to really bring my full self to work, and I can see the benefits of doing that, and I can see how I'm revered and how people want to work with me, what happens if I was like that from the very beginning? And I didn't worry about where I came from. And actually, in fact, it's actually looked upon more favorably, the fact that I came from maybe more of a disadvantaged background, for example. So my advice would be to people starting is non-negotiable on being professional. That's something you got to clean up. You can't come from ends to this place and still act as if it's ends. Do you know what I mean? Something doesn't go your way, you want to start swinging. That can't run. Right? Get that thought process out of your mind. Because I've had conversations with guys where they said something's happened at work, and they was like, if that was on road, it's long for that person. So professionalism is 100%. But what I would say is
long for man.
What does long for man mean?
Yeah.
I don't understand what that.
What does on road mean? Does that mean in the middle of the road?
You might have done. You might have done. So if
what does man mean?
But if you can really be as much of yourself whilst being professional, you've cracked the code. That I think is a tough code to crack, coming from Black and brown communities. It's almost like
you need to be that even outside of corporate. Whatever, if you're on your property element, right, you need to still be professional to speak to your solicitors, your estate agents, etc. You still need to, otherwise they're not going to take you serious in that space, right?
A perfect example of someone that would never code switch, has never code switched, but you can see it, they don't fit, and they weren't trying to fit. It's someone like a Dame Dash, right? He's someone like, to what you point, it's if you say anything the wrong way, he's taking whatever he knows in the streets to your face. So
but actually, no, just building on that, and I know we're running a little bit over on time, but from your guys' perspective, how would you perceive someone like Jay-Z, for example?
Guy's been code switching his entire life, bro. Only till he got to 1 billion, he started growing his hair out. But no, okay, let me be serious. He had a vision, he has a goal, and I think in order to get to that point, he had to navigate a certain way. So I don't know if he code switched, but he had to adapt and mold himself, be malleable to get to where he is, right? But it is interesting to see how he presents himself today, because for a long time it was short, cut hair, shape up, which fits the profile.
But now the music he was releasing at that time wasn't really code switching, quote unquote, right? So I personally don't feel like he's someone that did code switch. I think obviously he had to.
What about the boardroom though?
Yeah, he had to adapt to being able to gain respect in a boardroom, right? I think so. But in terms of, I personally don't think he has, because of the music he releases, right? It's not, you could say, yeah, his appearance looks a certain way, he doesn't wear chain. I think he's just grown and developed, evolved over a period. I wouldn't say it's like when he first came out, it's just like us, right? When we first came, the most important thing was to get a nice watch, like maybe when we first started, right? And now I don't care about watches. You want to get property. So someone might look at that as, oh, you code switch, you don't wear no jewelry. But no, in a sense, you started to value other things.
So, question actually on that one, because maybe Jay-Z is difficult, we don't know, right? But who is anyone that you know that for you has code switch and has never switched back?
That you've lost.
That you've lost for life. Is there anyone that you know?
That I know. Ooh. That's a tough one.
Do you know what would be funny is if we ask that question to people that know you guys, and they're like, "Yeah, Pabilo, Olu, Daniel."
No, a lot of people are gonna say P. A lot of people are gonna say P, but P's one is
say
not.
P because they didn't know him. They didn't
know
P,
necessarily. But it's more P is like, oh, I'll cut friends off if I need to. Like that mentality. People will be like, oh, that's code switching. Like I used to talk to P, don't even talk to me anymore, just because I'm not on property. Just because I'm not on property. So I can imagine people saying P, but no, I can't.
But you guys can't think of like people in your lives that you thought, okay, this person switched and we've just never seen them again.
No.
Well, I'm just thinking of a ᴠɪᴇᴡs. I don't know, because his journey has been incredible. Would you call that code switch? I mean, we never know because you don't know them as personal individuals. I think there's elements you do it in pockets. I know I've probably done it in pockets, right? The danger is if you do it to the point where you don't ever return back to who you was. That's a mad thing. Do you know what I mean? But Daniel, let's talk quickly about the hairstyle you wanted to rock one time.
Which hairstyle?
When you wanted to rock with the part. Yeah, talk about that.
Oh yeah. No, that wasn't real.
That was switching like a mother.
But actually.
Oh, you guys need to explain to me this hairstyle. What happened?
Chill.
Hey, Daniel got active when Pabilo asked him that question.
So we're in the kitchen. At university, and it was quite full. I think that everyone that lived on that floor was there, plus some other guests as well. Daniel always he always carries himself extremely well. Yeah. So he's walked in, nothing less, the usual, right? He's holding the bag. The thing about it, he told me a couple of days before, I'm thinking of trying a new hairstyle, but I just thought Daniel's just being silly, just bored. He's just chatting. He walks into the kitchen, yeah. I kid you not. What he'd spent time doing is taking a comb, and he'd created a line here, and he'd combed it like that.
Like a parting. Yeah.
Like a parting. Bro, you don't understand. It was almost like, you know Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was kind of going for something like that. He walked in, done whatever he'd done, and he left. I was screaming the kitchen down, bro. Because I was like, you're joking. because to do it as for black hair, what you've got to do is you've almost got to take like a dax, and you've got to apply dax in either direction, right? Yeah, and then you've got a comb to make it stick. Our hair doesn't work that way. So what the hell was this guy doing? Like, you either do that or you straighten it, and he ain't had time to straighten it. So he's applying some dax. So he's done it, walked in the kitchen, didn't say a word, and walked back out. And I just said to myself, what is going on? So Daniel, explain. Because is code switching. That is code switching. And we weren't even working for a company.
Why is it code switching? Why is it code switching? Why have you seen a white person? Have you seen a white person like that?
What was you trying to go for, bro?
Me, I was going for a different hairstyle. I just wanted to see what a parting was like. My granddad had a parting. Big boy part, like all the way down there.
So Daniel, have you done it? Have you done it since, Daniel?
I'll do it right now.
I don't think
the thing is, sure, I've got to show you what he was trying to go for. And when you see the hairstyle, you will say,
because I said the picture.
This guy was selling that night. He was selling out 100%. He probably went into his room and played classical music and sat there and locked his room.
So, but I was just trying to tell that it was silly. It wasn't permanent. It's just something silly. But saying that, I've often thought of. I'm not someone for patterns in my hair or something like that, but I've often thought of just doing something like a line or something. I thought, nah, this wouldn't really be perceived well at work. And of course, I'm past the age of kind of doing those things, but sometimes you just thought, just something. But then you always think about the perception.
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you a serious question. I know the answer to the question. I want to ask you anyway, though. Have you ever thought in any situation? Has any situation ever made you think, "Let me change my name"?
Deepo.
Change my name or
change your name?
What do you mean? Like change it fully?
Change it fully.
Yeah,
No.
Deepo.
No, not changing my name. Like I remember, it took me some time to even get used to, is I went to this executive leadership training, and she asked me to stand up and let's just go through an interaction of introductions. So she's like, "Hi, my name's so and so." I was like, "Hi, my name's Olu," and she was like, "Oli." I was like, "No, Olu." She's like, "Ola." I was like, "No, Olu." We were there for like,
yeah, I know. The
so
thing
going
is,
back and forth.
one thing I read about you is that he will nothing. We don't do anything next until you correct my name. If you say Ola, Oli, whatever you say, if you don't say Olu, we're not
And
moving
it's just
forward.
because there's so much power in your name, right? So I feel like that's not an element which I wouldn't want to change or switch code. Like most of the time when I tell people my name, the next question is, what does it mean, or what is your full name, etc., like that, right? Which my name has got such a strong meaning, which is something that I see strength and power in, right? And my grandparents came up with that, so I would never want to switch my name. And it's not something like, obviously it was difficult growing up, right? Everyone had like an English name. You had friends who might be like called Mark, Daniel, or whatever, right? And you might
trying to throw shots.
But I didn't have an English name, right? People would be like, "Oh, what's your English name?" And I'll be like, Adewale. If that's what, like, I don't have an English name, so I just see it as power, right? In there. So no, I wouldn't change.
Because that's a whole nother. Just I knew the answer, but I just wanted to see if it ever been through an experience that considered you to think, you know what, if I was to change it or give myself a nickname, would I get more opportunities?
No,
right. Just something like that.
I've never seen that as holding me. Like, to be honest, as soon as I've got into the corporate world, right, I don't really feel like there's anything that's held me back. But I also understand that I've had to work twice as hard to get where I am. So I don't see anything holding me back. But I do see as, I believe I've come from I try to stay away from a victim mindset and just say, look, anything I want, I can have. It's just depending on what am I willing to do to get it in the nicest way possible.
Sounds kind of mad.
Like he said, in the most professional way, what am I willing to do?
Yeah, that's a clip and a half that in 10 years
that sounds like
ends up showing up on a court or something.
We're not talking about codeswitching. We're talking about selling our souls, bro. Olu's on a whole other level.
Yeah, what am I willing to do? And a lot of things I'm not willing to do. Cool.
Because codeswitching, because changing your name is codeswitching on a whole extreme level. Like, I'm just thinking of people out there that may have thought, if I change my middle name or last name, would I be perceived a certain way? Would I get more look-ins in my application process?
But there are definitely people. There are people I know that have done that. They've chosen to use one of their other names on applications because they're not getting any luck with any responses or interview invites because of a different looking name that isn't English, whether it be Middle Eastern, whether it be a Nigerian name, Ghanaian name. People have used other names because of the perception when applying for jobs.
And Daniel, saying that, right, I know, like, through applications, I probably have had some rejection based on my name. The issue I have is what can I change it to? I can't just make it like a random name up and then get to the interview and just say, hey, by the way, my name's actually so and so. Like, it is what it is.
No, but yeah, because it's different in your view.
I think the last thing, because I know we're probably gonna bring it to a close. I think the last thing I'll just say, I think it's so important for individuals like us who have gone through that process of, we could say, really finding ourselves and finding our feet. Maybe I speak for myself, to have conversations with the people that are starting their careers to say, look, I've gone through that journey, so you don't have to. Be yourself from day one. And if you can be yourself from day one, then you've done most of the hard yards, because then the journey is much more easier, and you feel more. Not that for me personally, I ever felt like I was not not really myself. I was just adapting. So it's a certain different mindset. But yeah, I think it's so important for us to have those conversations whenever we get the opportunity to, because someone right now is starting and they're contemplating who they should be to adapt. In fact, thousands of people are doing that.
And I think building on what P said, I think this conversation is good that we've had this conversation, because I think a lot of people are probably going through this as well, is understanding the difference between being professional and what is code switching. Because I think what P mentioned initially, I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's around adapting to your environment. Shawal mentioned it in terms of going to Japan and having to learn how to greet people and the way they just do business there. There's nothing wrong with that. For the new people for our listeners starting their career or in their career, you should never see anything negative around that element. But in terms of the toxic element of code switching, that's where you should try to bring your authentic self to work, because that authentic self, I personally think, brings the best out of you, right? It lets you take that weight off your shoulder, where it's like, is everyone judging me, judging the way my hair, my appearance is? And truly you can focus on really delivering in whatever field or space you actually work in.
So thank you all for listening to episode 97 of Take Flight Podcast. We are 3 away from 100, which means it will be a Take Flight takeaway. However, we might switch things up. Nevertheless, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We hope we brought some meaningful insights and conversation to your commute, your workout, to your walk, or your general downtime. We hope you found it invaluable and useful. As always, we welcome your feedback. You can submit any feedback on Instagram at TakeFlightPodcast, or you can email us at takeflightpodcast@gmail.com. Stay safe, have a great week, and we will now be releasing these episodes on a Monday. God bless.
Take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but